Hi there. I thought it was long overdue to try a more complex recipe from some of these cookbooks, because there are a few in here that are a little bit more intimidating, just because of the amount of ingredients and time and steps involved with them. And one of them comes from the official Disney Parks cookbook, and it's from the Disney Contemporary Resort, inspired from the California Grill. It doesn't sound like it's on the menu anymore, but it's a grilled pork tenderloin. And I'm going to show you the picture of it here. And what makes this so complex is there's a lot of different variables to it. There is a mustard butter you need to make. Then there's the pork tenderloin itself you have to cook. There's a roasted garlic puree. There is a garlic and herb polenta, a Zinfandel glaze, and a mushroom glaze. So there's a lot of different things you need to make. Now, a few of these things, like the mustard butter, it says you can make it ahead of time and put it in the fridge and store it for up to like 2 weeks. The Zinfandel glaze is kind of the same way. You can make it and store it in the fridge. Same thing with the mushroom grill glaze. Those can be made ahead of time. Now, I'm just kind of dedicated an afternoon to just kind of do this all at once and get it done. But it's interesting how it works though. For example, the Zinfandel glaze, you do have to make it first because it goes into the mushroom glaze. Like, you add the mushroom glaze to it at some point. So I'm really glad, read ahead, read through the details carefully. The roasted garlic puree is actually what I'm going to get started with first, because that's where you just take a whole head of garlic, you put some olive oil, and you roast it in the oven for like an hour. I did a similar thing on the BLT flatbread recipe if you want to find that, which also came from, I think, a Disney resort as well. Okay, let's take this, let's understart. I can't think right now. Okay, let's get this challenge started. Here I have my head of garlic, and it says to cut the top third and stem off the head. So that's what I'm doing first. I'm just kind of cleaning up some of the excess as it comes off. Next, I'm going to place it on this sheet of aluminum foil, and I'm going to get some olive oil here, and then I'm going to drizzle the olive oil over it, wrap it up, and bake it for roughly an hour at 400 degrees. So my garlic, I'm trying to get some stuff out. You're supposed to squeeze out of the cloves, and I did this before, but I don't think I cut the top off last time. I'll have to go back and revisit that video and recipe, but boy, it smells like garlic. So here I'm making the mustard butter. First, I have like 6 tablespoons of butter that I caught off a stick and I put in a bowl. And I did let the butter soften first, so it'd be easier to work with. And right now I have some Dijon mustard, and it's supposed to be at room temperature as well. And I'm putting in a couple tablespoons of that. Next, I have a whole grain mustard, also at room temperature, that I'm also including a couple tablespoons of. Next goes in lemon juice, and it said to use fresh lemon juice. I just used the stuff in the bottle because I had that on hand. I didn't have any lemons available. And now I'm finally getting ready to put in some Worcester sauce. And then you can also add a little bit of pepper after you add this in to taste. It recommends up to 1/8 of a teaspoon. Now that I have all of my ingredients, I'm going to blend and mix this together, which I'll do. Once it's all together, I'll put it in the fridge until I'm ready to use it. It's going to go on the tenderloin as sort of a base when we're ready to cook that. Okay, so we're going to make the Zinfandel glaze. So you got to start with a cup of the Zinfandel. And it says to cook this at a high heat. I'm going to add the red onion. Okay. Now it says to cook this at this high heat for about 4 to 5 minutes until the broth is basically reduced in half. So while that is cooking down, I'm taking my pork tenderloin and cutting off some of the fat and stuff because it says you need some meat trimmings for this glaze. So I am using these trimmings and they'll go in the glaze shortly. Okay, so I think this is about half. So now I'm getting ready to add in chicken broth. And it calls for 2 cups of this. Adding the mushrooms. It also calls for some fresh thyme, but I think I've mentioned before, I'm just not a big thyme fan, like thyme and rosemary and sage. So I'm just omitting that from this. But if you like those flavors, I mean, again, I might not notice the difference in the end, but I still just don't want to add it. So, and I'm also going to add in some cracked peppercorns, whole ones. A couple more for good measure. All right. So I need to reduce this to about 1.5 cups. So let that continue cooking. Over here, I've got a 10-inch skillet started because what I'm going to do now, in this one, it says why this is doing that, I'm going to brown my trimmings with some flour. And where is, all right. I'm not sure if these are lightly browned. It's been a few minutes, but it might be as good as they're going to get. I don't want to burn these, but I'm going to give another minute. I'm just going to put these off the heat till this is ready to combine with it. Okay, I think this is reduced probably to what I need, hopefully. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just kind of swap these out. I'm going to put the pan back on the stove with the meat trimmings. And now it says, slowly whisk in the reduced wine, stirring until it boils and thickens. All right, let's see, I'm gonna give this just a minute to heat back up. So we're going to slowly whisk this in. A lot of stuff. All right, so this to kind of keep whisking this until it boils and thickens, which should take just hopefully a few minutes, but we'll see. Okay, I think this is starting to thicken some. Hopefully it's what they want. I'm supposed to put the rest like into a saucepan with a strainer because they don't want any solids in this. So I'm going to go ahead and start carefully pouring this. There's a lot of solids in this. So I'm going to like do a little bit at a time. I'm going to put the excess stuff into a bowl for now till it has a chance to cool down so I can dispose of it properly. Next, we're ready to prepare the balsamic mushroom glaze. So the first step is I've got my mushrooms here and they're just coated with some olive oil and some salt and some pepper. I'm going to pour these on a baking sheet and bake them in the oven at 400 degrees for about 7 to 8 minutes or until they're soft and browned. So time to make the mushroom glaze. So I've got my Zinfandel glaze back on the stove and it's simmered and warmed as it calls for. I'm going to now add in the mushrooms. Okay, now I'm adding in 3 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. All right, and I'm supposed to let this simmer about 10 minutes. Okay, so try to position this so you can see my stovetop. I put the mushroom glaze back here on a slower temperature to simmer. Now I want to start focusing on the 2 main portions of this meal. All we've been making so far is just sauces and glazes. And you know, we're a couple hours in at this point and we haven't gotten to the main event. So I'm going to start first with the pork. I've got it here. I'm gonna put some olive oil on this and some salt and pepper, and then we're gonna cook it in the cast iron. This saucepan will be for the garlic herb polenta. So just to give you a quick overview of what I've got going on here right now. I've got the pork tenderloin cooking in the cast iron skillet, and I do have the mustard butter that I will put on occasionally as I start basting it. In the big pot where I'm making the polenta, I've got some oil heated up so I can saute some onions. And I did want to mention in the cookbook, there is a step before you start cooking the grilled pork tenderloin where you can take some sage leaves and saute them in the oil and then add them to your plate. I think I've said before, sage is another of those spices, again, just don't care for it at all, so I skipped this step. Here you can see me starting to spread that mustard butter onto the pork tenderloin. Like I said, I gave all the edges a little bit of a brownness to them. Now I'm starting to cover this, and I will keep doing this and adding this butter as I continue to cook the tenderloin. Now to focus on the polenta, here I'm adding in the diced onion that I'll saute for a few minutes. Next, I'm adding in that garlic puree that I squeezed out of the garlic heads that I roasted in the oven. Here I'm adding some water to the pan, followed by some heavy cream. And I will give this a good stir and let it simmer over high heat for a little bit. So now I'm adding the cornmeal to this sauce for the polenta. And I'm supposed to add it slowly and keep stirring it constantly for about 15 to 20 minutes until it's thick and bubbly. My polenta off the stove. And I have to be honest, I didn't stir it constantly. I just kind of stirred it occasionally, kept an eye on it, made sure it didn't stick or burn over. Anyway, what you just saw me add in was some goat cheese, and now I'm adding in some shredded Parmesan cheese. And I will stir this all together and serve it. And it's ready to serve, I guess I should be saying. The pork tenderloin is also done and cooked, and it's been resting for a few minutes. So now I'm slicing it into basically like medallions or bite-sized chunks that I can use to put on my plate. Now it's time to plate the dish. First, I am starting by putting the polenta on the plate. Now I'm putting the pork medallions on the plate. Now finally, I'm covering the medallions with the mushroom balsamic glaze. And in the picture, it does look like you could put this directly on the polenta. I kept it separate just to get started. Review time for the grilled pork tenderloin, and don't mind the appearance. I had just worked out and I thought, you know what? It's a good time to do this recipe after I had just worked out to review it because I kind of felt like that when I was done. This one was complex and took a while, and I'll talk more about that in the rankings in a second, but I will say it was tasty. It was very good. The glaze for all that work was delicious, thank God, because if I would have done all that work and it would have tasted terrible and I had to thrown it out, I probably would have been pretty pissed off. But it was good. It was just very time consuming, but it was really good with the glaze. The polenta I really liked. Everything worked really well together, so it was a really nice dish. But let's get into the rankings and I'll talk a little bit more. First, I'm going to rank the ingredients, and that's on a scale of 1 to 5, and that's a combination of how hard are they to find and cost. And this is a 3.5. It's slightly above the middle, meaning it's more expensive. Nothing on this list is hard to find. Like any of this thing on this list, I'm looking at it again. I can't find one thing that you're not going to probably be able to find at one of your grocery stores. You might need a trip to a store for wine, depending on where you live and what your state sells, but there's a lot. And like I said, I think I only had maybe about a third of these things on hand. Obviously I have like olive oil, and I usually have chicken broth, and I usually have milk and salt and stuff. But a lot of these cheeses, the pork tenderloin, like I had to go buy all that stuff. So you're going to have a little bit of money invested in this recipe if you're going to do that. So that's why I'm ranking it like a 3.5. Difficulty level on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being easy and 5 being hard, I'm putting this at a 5. because that also includes time when you're talking about difficulty. This is time consuming, trust me. Like I said, now you could save time by breaking the things up in different days if you wanted. It does say that, like you can make the Dijon mustard butter ahead of time, like a day or two. You can make the Zinfandel glaze ahead of time and keep it in the fridge. It says up to 1 week in the fridge. The same thing with the balsamic glaze. You can make it and store it in the fridge. Now you have to put the Zinfandel glaze in the balsamic glaze, so you have to make that first. Like that's a requirement. Like I said, I did it one all afternoon and did it, but I think now I kind of hazy now, but I think I spent well over 3 hours, I think actually 4, on all of this. So there is a lot of time. Now, I did it. You just saw the video. If I can do it, and I'm not a fancy chef, I think most people could attempt this as long as you feel comfortable with everything that you watched me just do. I think most people can. But it's still a 5, especially compared to all the other recipes in this cookbook and this challenge. This is by far the most challenging or complex one I think that I have done in terms of when you factor in everything on that. And then would I make this again on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being never and 5 being absolutely? Look, taste-wise, it was good. I really did like it. But for me, I'm just like, I don't know if I want to spend that much time in the kitchen again for this one dish, to be completely honest. There are elements I would probably make again. Like, I like the polenta a lot, and I think that could be something you could easily do, very less time consuming, make it with a side dish or something else. I liked how I prepared the pork tenderloin. I think that method of putting the cast iron, seasoning it, adding the butter and stuff, that was really nice. And again, I really did love that glaze, but that is by far the most time consuming part, and the part that I'm like, I'm not sure. So I say all this as I'm probably giving it a 2. It is not that I hated it on why I'm ranking it so low. It's just the time, and I know me, like personally me. If you're somebody, this looks good to you, you'd love to spend time in the kitchen, or you have an afternoon, you want to try something, yes, knock yourself out. Get this cookbook, do this recipe. I think you'll like it. But if you're like me, where sometimes, you just want a meal that you can put together, especially like through the week, within a half hour to an hour, this is not it. Again, you could save some time by doing some steps ahead. And I know I'm kind of going on here, but I think this is a big recipe, deserves a big review. So you could save some time, do some steps ahead, but yeah, it's just know you're going to be taking on multiple steps, multiple time effort. It is a good meal at the end of the day. So I guess it's just up to you from watching me put this. Is this something that you would want to do?